Traditionally read as a historical record of an ancient war, the text describes a precise architecture of human consciousness and the mechanics of reality. Verse 1 introduces King Dhritarashtra. He is described as physically blind, but his condition serves as a specific metaphor for an observer whose consciousness is unable to perceive the objective state of his own environment. Within his opening question, the king uses the Sanskrit word mamaka, meaning my sons. This introduces a specific psychological variable, the rigid categorization of reality into mine and not mine. This mine versus yours binary acts as the primary source code for internal conflict, creating the friction necessary to generate ego. Here, every psychological decision functions like a quantum event, collapsing infinite possibilities into a concrete reality. The opening of this text establishes a mechanistic framework for identifying our daily inner conflicts. It requires us to recognize the exact moments we begin to operate from a state of internal division. Verse 2 shifts the focus to Duryodhana. In this framework, he functions as the personification of the human ego, facing an imminent threat to its dominance. When the ego feels threatened, it executes a specific tactical maneuver. Instead of immediate aggression, it seeks out intelligence, represented here by the teacher, Drona. Knowledge itself is neutral data. However, when in self-preservation, the ego attempts to manipulate that objective intelligence to justify its own survival. In verse 3, Duryodhana uses targeted language to remind his teacher that the opposing army was organized by Drona's own student. He is applying strategic emotional pressure to bias his teacher's judgment. This interaction creates a measurable energy disturbance within the psyche, where the ego's noise attempts to override clear intellect. The intended result is a degradation of the intelligence system. Disturbing the mind's equilibrium forces the system to make errors in its tactical decisions. When the ego perceives a threat to its own reality, it will instinctively attempt to weaponize neutral intelligence through emotional interference. Verses 4 through 6 list a series of warriors. These names function as an inner map, detailing the various psychological forces present in any conflict. The map defines 3 primary variables. Bhima represents raw power, Arjuna represents focused intelligence, and Drupada represents the combination of ego and authority. Supporting variables then fill the network. Drishtaketu provides the node for resolve, while Kashiraja provides the data point for wisdom. When these disparate mental energies synchronize, they produce a unified force capable of high-level output. Verse 6 introduces the term Maharatha. This is not a description of physical rank, but a level of psychological mastery. This correlates to what modern neuroscience calls the executive control system. It regulates and directs the mind and senses towards a singular objective. The map also highlights Abhimanyu, representing the volatile state where high courage is paired with incomplete knowledge. Psychological power depends on the development of executive control. Without the ability to command these internal energies, they remain fragmented and ineffective. In verses 7 through 9, Duryodhana lists his own generals and assets. This list functions as a self-reassurance mechanism, a predictable behavior that signals an underlying unacknowledged fear. To create a sense of stability, the ego constructs an attachment network. It tethers itself to relationships and assets rather than anchoring to objective facts. This network is driven by the motivation described in the Sanskrit phrase madarthe, literally, for my sake. Power structures built on biased loyalty and self-interest are structurally flawed. They are designed for ego preservation rather than functional reality. These emotional anchors allow the ego to project strength to its environment while masking its internal instability. Any psychological framework built on the singular foundation of for my sake is mathematically prone to collapse when subjected to external pressure. Verse 10 details the ultimate outcome of the ego's cognitive distortion. Duryodhana assesses his own forces as infinite and impenetrable, while dismissing the opposing forces as strictly limited. This is an example of psychological projection. The ego attempts to neutralize its fear by artificially shrinking the perceived magnitude of the threat it faces. This illustrates the gap between perception and truth. Reality operates on a consistent frequency, regardless of an observer's lens. In quantum measurement, observation does not change base reality. It only reveals the system as it actually exists. This mirrors our common psychological behavior. We often adjust our perceptions to make uncomfortable facts appear smaller or less relevant. The universe functions according to its own consistent laws. It does not reorganize its physics to match the ego's distorted viewpoint. The first 10 verses of this manual demonstrate a consistent psychological pattern. An internal state built on division and attachment creates a fragile structure that inevitably fails when it encounters the pressure of objective reality.